Ich glaube, ich habe mal Lust auf das. The Genius behind The Sims.
The Sims is a digital dollhouse filled with little computer people, and it's your job to keep them alive, keep them happy, and keep their house furnished with ever more expensive trinkets. But micromanaging the needs and desires of an entire family...
Yeah, baby! Sims 2 Interface! Still the GOAT! Oh, Sims 2 ist still the GOAT. Ich will Sims 1 und 2 nochmal spielen. Ich will Sims 1 und 2 nochmal irgendwie in einer ordentlichen Version spielen. Ah. Ich finde Sims 4 schon am besten. Ich mag das Sims 2 Interface am liebsten. Aber es ist halt auch, ich meine, das ist halt auch sehr viel Nostalgie einfach, weil ich sehr viel. Alter, ich habe Sims 2 so unfassbar fucking viel gespielt damals, als es rausgekommen ist, ja.
Can get pretty tedious, so the developers at Maxis soon realized that they'd need to give these guys a certain amount of autonomy, free will, the power to think for themselves if the player stops giving direct commands.
Cringe.
Which is actually
Alter, Sims 1 Ästhetik ist schon wild, ne? Sims 1 Ästhetik ist schon wild. Einfach mal wieder Sims 1 laden, Rosebud eingeben und Architekt spielen. Ja, schon geil.
Pretty complicated task. These characters need to read as believable humans. And they need to be able to adapt to any possible house you build around them or any social situation they find themselves in. And crucially, they can't be...
Ich dachte, Mark wird jetzt legit einfach die Leiter wegnehmen. Der Klassiker damals, wie kann man seine Sims am besten umbringen, in den Pool und die Leiter wegnehmen. Ah, Klassiker.
So smart that the player can just sit back and do nothing. So how do you make a video game AI that can do all of that? Well, that's what I want to explore in this video. I'm going to break down the clever ways that Maxis designed autonomy in this 4-game franchise, though with a focus on the original game and, let's be honest, the best one, which is The Sims 3. It's not going to get too technical, but there is a metric buttload of resources in the description if you want to dive deep.
Ich glaube ich habe Sims 4 habe ich nur den Charaktereditor gespielt. Aber Sims 3 habe ich tatsächlich gar nicht so viel Interesse dran gehabt. Aber ich kann auch gar nicht mehr sagen, warum. Ich habe halt nur die Base-Games von allen hauptsächlich gespielt, aber mit Sims 2 hatte ich definitiv am meisten Spaß.
With that out of the way, I'm Mark Brown, this is Game Maker's Toolkit, and here's how The Sims think.
They don't.
Decision making in The Sims is all driven by...
Oh, die Nostalgie. Oh, die Nostalgie. Oh my God, it's hitting me. Oh no. Oh, es ist wieder Weihnachten 2000. Oh nein. Oh, was ist los? Ich bin wieder 11 Jahre alt. Oh Gott, Alter, jeder hat das damals gehabt. Gott, ich kenne die ganzen Items noch. Alter, wie oft, das war immer so die Standard, auch der Standardtisch und die Stühle, die ich mir am Anfang geholt habe, hier dieser Billo-Fernseher zum Unterhalten. Oh, es ist noch alles eingespeichert.
A set of mental and physical needs, dubbed motives by Maxis. In The Sims 1, that's hunger, hygiene, fun, energy, bladder, social, comfort, and room, or tidiness. They all go from -100 to +100, and if you combine them all, you get The Sims' overall level of happiness. These meters are constantly ticking down, each decaying at slightly different rates and faster if the sim is performing a related action. The bladder meter drops more quickly when the sim is eating, for instance. Maxis carefully...
Wie dieses Tablett so am... wie so ein... Als wäre es irgendwie eine PS1-Textur einfach in einem Hin- und Her-Jittern ist. Oh, nee, ich will Sims 1 nochmal spielen. Wie kann ich Sims 1 am besten spielen? Das ist doch garantiert... Ist das easy enough, dass du das irgendwo einfach ich weiß nicht, bietet das EA noch irgendwie an? Und das funktioniert einfach. Das ist halt das Problem immer bei so PC-Spielen, so von 2000 oder so. Ach Gott, einfach mal, komm. Komm EA, einfach so eine, gib das einfach mal Night Dive Studios, die machen dann so ein Remaster davon. Ich will Sims 1 und 2 Remaster und ich will vor allem The Movies Remaster. Komm bitte. Ich will lass mich einfach The Movies irgendwie. Ich glaube, ich muss zu Hause noch irgendwo meine physische Version haben. Ich will einfach nochmal, Alter, The Movies war so gut. Oh, The Movies. Oh, ich bin wieder 16 Jahre alt und spiele The Movies auf dem PC meiner Eltern.
Tuned all of these rates to hopefully match a normal human scale.
Ich hab's easy neulich installiert. Also ich habe halt ich weiß nicht, ob ich noch meine physische Version von Sims 1 habe, ja. The Movies ist Activision und jetzt liegt das auch bei Microsoft. LOL. War das nicht sogar Lionhead Spiel? Lionhead Studios? War das nicht so ein Peter Molyneux-Ding oder so? Warte mal. Ist ein Computerspiel. Ja, genau, Lionhead Studios. Activision, Sega. Oh oh. Oh oh. Oh oh. Haben die das irgendwo anders gepublished oder? Aber ich meine, das wäre ganz gut. Ich meine, Lionhead ist ja eh nicht mehr, aber ne, das Studio hat ja Microsoft dann gehört. Activision gehört denen dann jetzt auch. Hätten sie Sega doch kaufen müssen. Ich nehme jeden großen Merger in Kauf, wenn ich einfach nochmal The Movies irgendwie aufgelegt bekomme. Einfach genau wie damals. Einfach genau das Spiel nochmal. Remastered einfach nur. Eine gute Version, ja. Phil, du musst Sega kaufen. Wir brauchen. Alter, The Movies ist so geil. Ich weiß halt nicht, ob das heutzutage, ob das immer noch ballert, weil das war halt das war halt wirklich so 2005, das war halt wirklich, ich hatte sogar recht gehabt, ich war 16 Jahre alt, als das rauskam, holy shit. Weil das war so ganz am Anfang von YouTube, das ist 2005 rausgekommen, das heißt, das hatte auch noch eine eigene Webseite, wo Leute die Videos hochgeladen haben, das hatte eben so eine richtig tight-knit Community. Gott, Alter, ich erinnere mich wirklich noch, dass ich so stundenlang am Wochenende einfach da saß, bei uns im Arbeitszimmer an dem Rechner und hab einfach, keine Ahnung, so 5, 6 Stunden abends oder dann auch morgens, nachmittags, am Wochenende einfach The Movies gespielt die ganze Zeit. Absolut based, das Ding. Gott, The Movies war so gut.
Schedule, like needing 8 hours of sleep.
Ich hab mein fucking Rockband, nee, nicht mein Rockband gab's da noch gar nicht. Mein Singstar-Mikro habe ich angeschlossen, um Voice-Over aufzunehmen für die Filme, die ich da gemacht habe.
And 3 meals a day. So, if the player doesn't give the sim a command, it will decide what to do by itself, and that decision is driven by a desire to fulfill these motives. Now, you might assume that a sim knows how to meet its own needs, that a toilet will solve bladder, that fridges and stoves solve hunger, and books, TV, and pinball tables solve fun. But it doesn't work like that. It's actually the other way around. Instead, all of the objects in the sim's house contain this data and will broadcast what they can offer. A bed will say, "Sleep on me" to get 10 energy. A toilet offers +20 to bladder if you use it, or +5 to room if you clean it, and other sims will offer themselves as a way to top up social points. Maxis calls these advertisements. So, whenever the sim decides what to do, it quickly makes a list of every object in the house and what they can offer. The sim can then take that advertised number and weigh it based on its current needs. It does this by applying a multiplier to the promise score based on the sim's current motive levels. For example, if the sim is well rested, the bed's energy boosting score is damped down. But if the sim is knackered, then that same score is boosted dramatically. Now the sim can take the list of interactions and their weighted scores and rank them. At the top of the list is the interaction that will give the most benefit to the sim right now, and so the digital dude should do just that. This clever system was actually inspired by one of designer Will Wright's previous games, Sim Ant, a virtual ant colony where the critters would be tempted to move by attractive pheromones. It's basically the same idea, but instead of pheromones, it's TVs, fridges, pinball machines, and bathtubs. However,
Sims einfach literally Ameisen nur vom Gedanken her.
People aren't ants. And so if this was implemented exactly as I just described, it would lead to weird behaviors that make Sims seem either robotic or irrational. So many careful tweaks are.
Ich liebe einfach die Animation von den Fischen, die so in PNGs. Okay, wie viel FPS? 0,2.
Are needed to make it work properly. For instance, not all needs are equal. If a sim is both starving to death
Untertitel habe ich teilweise auch gemacht,
bored,
ja.
they should probably eat a sandwich.
Ich habe so teilweise so stummfilmmäßig das auch gemacht, dass du dann halt immer so die Texte eingeblendet hast, auch die sie gesagt haben.
Rather than binge Netflix. But if the fridge and TV are both offering the same reward, which should the sim pick? Well, more rational behavior can be achieved by defining unique curves for each motive.
Rational.
For hunger, we want a curve like this.
Davis Arini
now,
sim.
the fridge's score
Only
will
rational
be reduced
decisions.
to almost 0 when the sim is full, but will be extremely high when the sim is starving, making
Buying
that more
Trilby.
important than any other motive.
It's just the most
Similar,
rational decision.
smaller curves are used for other physiological needs like bladder, hygiene, and energy. However, less important needs like fun, social, and comfort actually increase as the sim becomes more happy. This was inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which says humans will focus on cognitive and social tasks only when their more basic lizard brain needs are met. Plus, while peeing will satiate your bladder, you can never have too much fun. We can also weigh the scores based on other factors.
You can
too.
never have
For
too
instance,
much
each
piss.
sim has its own personality based on their score in areas like niceness.
Also bei mir als Sim würde Pissen auf jeden Fall auch den Fun-Level hochtreiben. Das ist einfach ein viel zu gutes Gefühl, eine komplett volle Blase zu lernen.
Neatness and playfulness. So while a pinball machine and a bookcase might advertise the same boost to fun, a sim will weigh this based on their level of playfulness. Therefore, a more serious sim will choose to pick up a book. Plus, we can weigh the interaction based on its distance from the sim, which will make nearby objects more tempting. Finally, some interactions can override everything, like
oh mein Gott, dieses fucking Auto-PNG. Oh. Alter, Core Memory unlocked einfach gerade.
Telephone call or a school bus, and other interactions can be locked entirely, so certain objects won't advertise themselves to kids, or adults, or a visiting guest. All of these factors combined give us a much more useful score, which has been adjusted to the different needs, personality, and proximity of the sim. And it's from these scores that the sim's next move is picked. But, perhaps most importantly of all, the sim doesn't actually choose the best option every time. Instead, the sim picks one of the top scoring interactions at random. This stops the sim from feeling robotic and overly predictable, and it also means they're not able to fulfill all of their needs perfectly, which, actually gives the player something to do.
Eigentlich ziemlich clever.
What I've just described is a special type of AI called utility AI, or needs-based AI. This is a system where a character has a predefined set of needs, then looks around at its current options and picks the one that will fulfill its needs best. The one with the most utility. And in The Sims, it means a little person can be dropped into any house and then will act in a lifelike manner, carefully attending to its hunger and energy when necessary, but socializing and having fun when not. Plus, by putting the information on the objects instead of the sim, it's really easy for Maxis to add hundreds of objects to the game or make endless expansion packs without touching the rest of the code. And so, for these reasons, this basic system has been used in all 4 games in the franchise.
Oh, Platinum
but
Rank.
Maxis wanted to take things even further when making the ambitious 3rd game in the series. Okay, so in The Sims 1, we saw how each Sim's personality, like their neatness and playfulness, would impact their decision-making.
Ich weiß gar nicht mehr, was war im Dreier nochmal das Besondere? Also im Zweier sind ja ich habe den Dreier halt echt wenig gespielt. Im Zweier sind ja diese Wünsche hinzugekommen, die dann noch so rotieren und dann kannst du die halt erfüllen für Bonuspunkte, mit dem du dir halt auch so absurden Scheiß kaufen konntest, wie halt literally ein Money Tree. Oder eine Möglichkeit, irgendwie auch dich zu verjüngen oder so ein Scheiß.
This would make each sim feel somewhat distinct. But for The Sims 3, this idea was expanded dramatically by swapping the personality meters with traits. Things
Macht das
like
fertig, dass die UI
neat,
so klein ist.
neurotic, heavy sleeper, and commitment issues. With 5 trait slots and 60-odd traits in the base game alone, that's about 5 million possible Sims, effectively making every character unique. Now, these traits have many impacts on the sim, like how a clumsy sim will trip themselves up while walking, and a slob will fart and burp while idle. Sims
Same.
also get bonus moodlets
Just like
for
me.
acting to their traits, and there are interactions that are exclusive to Sims with certain traits, like how a computer whiz can make cash through hacking. But these traits also impact on the Sims' decision-making. This time, however, instead of weighing the
Average
scores
Madden
against
player.
the Sims' personality, The Sims 3 actually just adds more motives to the pile. So in the code, every sim has their usual basic needs like hunger, energy, and bladder, but also more motives related to their traits. Therefore, a couch potato needs to sit on the sofa and watch TV, just like how they need to pee, eat, and sleep. And then, in the same way that a fridge advertises itself as a fix for hunger, objects can advertise themselves as a fix for the Sim's trait-related motives. For instance, interactions like scare a Sim, steal candy from a child, smash a dollhouse, and write a trolling comment on the computer are all advertised to Sims with the evil trait. This means that Sims are encouraged to enact their unique personalities autonomously, while also juggling their standard everyday needs. Now, this idea of adding additional motives to a sim can also be used to simulate social situations. For instance, if a sim enters a gym, they will temporarily be given the additional motive be in gym, which is
Ey, was? Fucking Hitman Level. Yo, Agent 47.
satisfied by objects like a workout bench or treadmill. When they leave, the motive is removed. Back at home, a sim will be motivated to act as a hospitable host for as long as they have guests around. Meanwhile, the guests will be motivated to act in a way that's socially acceptable. And in The Sims Medieval, a sim is given work-related motives while they're on the clock and then loses them during breaks. However, these motives can also be affected by traits. For example, if a sim sits down to have a picnic, then the sim's friends and family are motivated to join them, while strangers are discouraged. But a sim with the inappropriate trait will override this, and they will, in fact, be motivated to sit with people they don't know, just to make them feel uncomfortable. All of this means that Sims will act naturally and believably in whatever location they end up in, but with a few Sims standing out as acting unusually because of their unique personality. And this is all done by simply tweaking the Sims' motivations, rather than hand-scripting a bunch of specific rules and interactions. Though, that being said, sometimes you do need more hard-coded rules. Take that house visit I mentioned. A visiting sim is indeed motivated to act in an appropriate way, but what happens if they stay too long, or if the player steps in and makes the sim act inappropriately? Well, to make this work, the house visit is overseen by a set of rules that dictate social norms. So if a sim sleeps in the host's bed or uses their computer, the rule set will instruct the host to warn the sim, and then kick them out if they go even further. Likewise, conversations need more hands-on authoring to reflect extremely specific pair-ups of people or super distinct social cues. For example, how should a sim respond to a joke if they are steaming mad at the joke teller, or if the other sim has said the same joke 5 times in a row? This is done through a series of rules, with an input, a set of conditions, and the output. So for that joke I just mentioned, if the listener has the good sense of humour trait, they will laugh. If their long-term relationship is sour, they'll be insulted, and if the sim repeatedly tells jokes, the listener will be bored. These so-called production rules are ranked in order of specificity as defined by the designer, and the top scoring outcome is used to pick the response. Maxis ended up writing thousands of handcrafted rules to determine the outcome of hundreds of possible conversation topics. But because the rules just go in a big stack and the most specific one is picked, they can't clash, break the game, cause an infinite loop, or lead to any other issue. Just like with the objects, designers can simply keep adding more and more to the pile. So far, I've been talking about individual sims, or small social situations like a conversation or a party. But what about simulating an entire town's worth of little people? You see, in The Sims 3, your house exists in an open-world neighbourhood with dozens of other sims, and features homes, restaurants, a park, and so on. Maxis needed to invent new tools to make all of this work. But, in truth, the neighbourhood actually operates in a similar way to the Sims themselves. That's because the town also has a bunch of motives.
Haben die das beim Vierer wieder entfernt, die Sachen? Oder? Weil ich meine, er hat ja eben schon von sich aus gesagt, dass es irgendwie der Dreier am besten macht. Deswegen, das klingt gerade so wie mit die interessantesten Aspekte, die hinzukommen, als ob der Vierer das irgendwie entfernt hätte wieder.
And will make choices that will help it fulfill its needs. For instance, it ideally wants to maintain a 50-50 gender balance. So when a new sim is added to the neighborhood, the probability of it being male or female is weighted by the current needs of the city. It also has a desired employment rate of about 80%, so it can force background sims to get hired or fired.
EA wieder am rumficken mit allem.
Basically, once a day at midnight, the town will check its own happiness level and then take a few actions in order to satisfy its needs.
The
individual lots have motives too. For instance, the restaurant may wish to have roughly 8 people eating outside during lunch and dinner hours. To achieve this, the lot will temporarily give the eat outside motive to a bunch of sims to tempt them to come to the restaurant. It can even narrow the focus to sims with certain traits, like culinary, and discourage those with other traits, like frugal. Now, these sims that appear at the restaurant seem like fully autonomous characters. They have needs, they have families, they may even have had a baby and changed job since you last saw them. So are they actually living out their own simulated lives just off camera? Well, not quite. The background sims are actually simulated at a very low level of detail. Each day, the system looks at each sim and scores possible big life changes that could happen to them, like getting a job, falling in love with someone, or getting married. These are, of course, weighted using things like traits, existing relationships, and career paths. Also, the designers created charts for what a sim's needs will likely look like throughout the day. If it's just after lunch, for instance, they're probably not going to be very hungry. So when a background sim is promoted into being a foreground sim because they're in proximity to the player, the system checks the time of day and snaps all of their motives to the chart. Clever stuff. So, we've got tools to simulate characters, conversations, house visits, restaurants, and entire towns. And when you have such clever tech, it's tempting to simulate, well, everything. Take, for instance, the urinal rule. If you pee standing up, you know the deal. When picking a place to take a leak, you should always try to maintain a 1 urinal buffer from other people. It's like an unwritten social rule. So, Maxis added this rule to the game as well. But then, before the game launched, they took it out. That's because when the sim followed that rule, it was just kind of predictable and dull. But if sims picked toilets at random, it would often lead to funny and memorable moments of sims acting awkwardly. You see, while the sims might have
einfach am fucking Pissoir anfangen Smalltalk zu halten. Yo, have you seen that guy's dick over there? Vor allem, weißt du, die Regel ist, das ist noch viel einfacher. Du musst dich gar nicht irgendwie erst dahin stellen, sondern auch fürs Pissen einfach in den Stall reingehen. Weißt du, wir sollten einfach das Ding einfach abschaffen und einfach nur Bathroom Stalls einführen, sonst gar nichts. Weißt du, dann musst du auch nicht irgendwie, dann kannst du auch alles geschlechtlich halten oder so. Viel einfacher, viel besser.
Started life
Ich will auch beim Pissen meine Ruhe haben, weißt du? Keine Lust, dass da noch irgendwelche anderen Leute um mich rumstehen die ganze Zeit. Lass mich einfach, just let me piss in peace, please.
Rather nerdy simulation game, essentially SimCity, but at a much smaller scale. It quickly grew into something very different. In playtests for the original game, Will Wright was surprised that players would tell elaborate stories about their sim families, embellishing details, reading into their decisions, and playing up random moments. It was fascinating to me how readily people would build a story around this, Wright says. To support this, Maxis added a last-minute feature to the game, the ability to take a screenshot, write a caption, and create a simple comic book, which could be uploaded to EA's website
2005er Twitter, holy shit.
with a click. The feature was extremely popular, proving that for many people, The Sims was an avenue for storytelling. And that's still true today. Just search YouTube for The Sims to see what I mean. But supporting storytelling is a delicate
Warum hatte das gerade so Elsa Spider-Man-Vibes, das Video, was er gezeigt hat?
balance. The game needs to be specific enough to create story.
Ja, ich habe auch eine schüchterne Blase. Alter, ich kann teilweise einfach nicht pissen. Ich kann teilweise, so, das kann kurz vorm Platzen sein, aber ich weiß es nicht. Ich stehe dann da, alles hängt raus, ist bereit zum Abfeuern und mein Körper ist einfach so, ne, ne, nein, da sind Leute um dich rum, das geht jetzt gerade nicht. Und das Problem ist, das wird ja dadurch nur noch schlimmer. Das heißt, wenn du da irgendwie stehst und nach so 2 Sekunden kommt nichts raus, dann wirst du ja nicht noch lockerer. Dann wirst du eigentlich noch nervöser. Das ist so und deswegen einfach lieber, weißt du, einfach lieber in so einen Store reingehen und da in Ruhe einfach pissen. Das ist viel angenehmer.
But not so specific that there's no room for the player's imagination. So the final piece of this AI puzzle is knowing when to hold back, knowing what not to simulate, knowing when to make urinal choice random rather than scripted. One way to do this is to carefully employ ambiguity, basically to leave some things unsaid so players can make assumptions and project their own headcanon on the events on screen. A good example of this is The Sims' iconic babbling dialect known as Simlish. In early design documents, we can see that Maxis experimented with having the Sims speak real-world languages like English, Navajo, Estonian, and Ukrainian. But due to technical and logistical reasons, they ended up hiring 2 improv comics to just make up absolute nonsense.
Droba, 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 sika niba,
Basically me. Das ist einfach, was ich jeden Tag mache, die ganze Zeit.
This actually works
Janneke kann's
wonders.
bestätigen.
When the Sims babble gobbledygook at each other, the player can assume, fill in the gaps, project their own imagination on the Sims, and make the game their own. If we used actual language, the game would flatten and shrink, and everyone would be having the same experience, says EA's Matt Brown. No relation.
Ja.
Can also make Sims feel smarter than they actually are, and hide cases where the simulation is doing something wrong. Another avenue is to always follow the player's lead, and never use autonomy to go against the story the player is trying to tell. That's why Sims will use free will to relieve their bladder and fill their stomach, but won't autonomously quit their job or try romancing a random Sim. Just like with the Nemesis system in Shadow of War, Maxis took inspiration from the concept yes and from improvisational comedy. So the Sims try to build on the player's actions and try not to negate them. For instance, if a player makes 2 Sims fall in love, the autonomous system shouldn't make them break up again. Likewise, user-created Sims enter the world with no sexual preference, but if you instruct a male Sim to, say, flirt with other dudes, you're suggesting that he should be bi or gay, and the game will run with that. The game should always try to maintain the consistency of the player's story. So The Sims has a fascinating AI system, which allows for realistic human simulations and creative player-led storytelling. And most of it is driven by a very
Average Gym Outfit mit der Kappe auch noch.
simple concept. Characters, locations, and entire neighborhoods are given a bunch of needs, and then try to make choices that will best fulfill those needs. With a little clever tuning, this leads to characters who feel believable, social situations where Sims act appropriately, and entire neighborhoods that stay consistent and balanced. But this is not just useful for running quirky, goal-free life simulations, and we can see utility AI being used in other types of games too. For instance, in XCOM, an enemy unit will consider every tile it can move to and score them based on factors like distance, flanking opportunities, angle, cover bonus, visibility,
they're
and
just like my
proximity
Sims.
before moving to the...
Stell dir mal vor, du spielst XCOM und irgend so ein Alien pisst sich auf einfach in die Hose, weil die Blase voll war. Now that's the real Sims experience.
tile with the best score. It can also be used in procedural generation to build worlds that fit predetermined requirements. Utility AI is a fantastic addition to a game maker's toolkit, and its implementation in The Sims should serve as wonderful inspiration to game designers. And now, just to melt your brain, here's Katy Perry singing in Simlish.
Yarby Denzel table dupes, eBay Duka Mimi shoops, hippie keeps the upper goop. Yarby Denzel table dupes, eBay Duka Mimi shoops.
Das ist einfach nur isländisch, kann mir niemand was anderes erzählen. Gaffling boing. Skibidubabna. Easy. Easy. Weißt du musst noch ablesen dafür. Kannst du einfach irgendeine Scheiße ausdenken dabei. Das ist das Hervorragende daran. Oh. Gutes Video. Gutes Video. Gutes Video. Me likey sehr. Ist auf jeden Fall ein cooles System eigentlich, das so zu überdenken. Ne, gerade halt dann so auch von der Art und Weise, okay, ne, wir fangen halt irgendwie grundlegend an mit diesen Werten und dann zu gucken, okay, das könnte aber zu dem Problem führen, wie können wir das wieder umgehen, wie können wir das wieder umgehen, wie können wir das wieder umgehen. Dass es im Endeffekt eigentlich relativ simpel ist, aber dadurch ganz clever gut funktioniert. Ich meine, das ist meistens bei diesen Fällen so. Das ist ja teilweise wirklich so die KI, die sich irgendwie am besten anfühlt, vom eigentlichen Prinzip her doch sehr simpel irgendwie gestrickt und aufgebaut ist. Aber ja. Nee, gutes Ding. Ja. Ich muss leider sagen, es ist schon spät. Und ich bin kurz davor, glaube ich, einfach. So gerade geht's, aber ich will echt nicht riskieren, nochmal so einen Lowpoint wie eben zu haben, wo ich fast am Wegratzen bin. Deswegen, so leid es mir auch tut, aber ich würde die restlichen Spiele dann auf nächsten, ich muss nochmal nachgucken in meinem Kalender, ich glaube nächsten Freitag oder Samstag ist es. Nächsten Freitag oder Samstag. Und dann machen wir auch ein größeres Ding draus. Da machen wir auch wieder, dann, wie gesagt, dann fange ich auch definitiv früher an. Und dann machen wir, glaube ich, wie beim letzten Mal, ich weiß nicht, wie lange das waren, irgendwie 8 oder 9 Stunden oder so. Dann machen wir einfach wieder so ein ganz großes Ding draus und holen die ganzen anderen Sachen nach. Ich glaube, bis dahin dann sollten auch nicht so viele Sachen nachgerückt sein oder so. Ich glaube, das Einzige, was ich vielleicht, ich weiß nicht, ob ich dafür, wie gesagt, ich will die Streams auf jeden Fall reduzieren. Das heißt, ich weiß nicht, ob ich noch einen separaten dafür machen würde die Woche. Ich glaube vielleicht eher, dass ich oder so mit Leuten aus dem Discord einfach ein bisschen Exoprimal oder so spiele. Ich glaube das eher. Ich glaube, das muss nicht unbedingt gestreamt werden. Ich glaube, das reicht, wenn wir das einfach im Discord oder so machen, die Tage abends. Da hätte ich auf jeden Fall Bock drauf, das einfach ein bisschen zu spielen. Aber ich glaube, für mich wäre es besser, wenn ich mich jetzt einfach unten hinlege und ein bisschen was penne. Weil ich habe morgen noch einiges zu tun und Sachen vorzubereiten. Ja, deswegen trotzdem, ich hoffe gerade eben, der Einblick in Paranormal Side hat gefallen. Wie gesagt, ich muss das auch noch weiter spielen, wird es auf jeden Fall eine Review geben auf dem Zweitkanal, wenn ich dazu durch bin. Inhaltmäßig, wie gesagt, auf dem Patreon ist sind 2 große neue Beiträge rausgenommen in allen Tiers, eben auch die sind auch für Steady rausgekommen, falls ihr daran Interesse haben solltet. Gerne nochmal die Pikmin-Review auf dem Zweitkanal